Welcome everybody. My name is Frank. I'm one of the jury members. I'd like to hand you over first to Therese Aswad. Now Therese Aswad from the council.
Hello everybody and welcome. I've just been asked to say a few words of introduction to this special event. And I guess I have to say things like climate change is a challenge that is facing all of us, and on a global and individual level. And it's something we can no longer deny, as in the past people have tried to, or ignore, or prevaricate over any longer. It is essential that we have important discussions, debates, and research on these issues so that we can inform our decision-making in order to make the right choices for ourselves, our communities, and the world in general. Every individual has a responsibility to take part in this discussion and debate, and there's so many urgent and pressing needs for action that we can't ignore it any longer. And really, as a result of this, I think the citizens' joys have become something of a tool that is used round, for government at all levels, really, and is very empowering to people from all backgrounds and from all walks of life. And ours has been functioning here in Barrow since November over a period of 10 sessions. The citizen jury is a way of bridging the gap and building trust between political, scientific and social consensus on climate change and the inherent issues with this. They give the members of the public the time and opportunity to learn about and discuss a topic before reaching a conclusion and arriving at a workable recommendation. Much later on in the evening, I think we'll be hearing quite a bit about some of the recommendations. And of course, Barrow Borough Council and councils all over the country already have their low carbon initiatives, but the joy is there to focus on specific things that we can do to boost our response, really. As I said before, it has been running for 10 sessions, and it represents people from all backgrounds who have been looking at climate change issues and seeking ways of addressing these issues with the focus on how we can best do this in Barrow and the Furness area. They have put forward different ideas and plans, and throughout the whole process, they have been supported by an oversight panel, including organisations such as BA Systems, Extinction Rebellion, Can Do FM, Barrow Borough Council, and many more. So I hope this evening will be really useful and insightful evening for us to hear what plans they have come up with and how they hope we can address these within our town and area. And now I'd like to hand you over to the next item for the evening.
Right. In the next item, Louise and Barry will explain how we went about producing the recommendations and our involvement in that process. So, Louise.
Hi everyone. We are a diverse, energetic group of Furness citizens which reflects the makeup of the local community. We've come together with a range of different opinions and ideas. We've heard from a range of speakers and have challenged them to further our understanding and knowledge. We've not always agreed, and we've had challenging discussions before reaching our conclusion, which has promoted our learning. We believe that climate change is something that affects everyone. We have taken this process to heart. This has left many of us feeling overwhelmed but hopeful and enthusiastic that our small steps can make a difference. Over to you, Barry.
Through our work, we've produced a shared vision, which we believe will do the best for Furness residents, businesses, and organisations. We feel positive that there is much work going on, but that few people know of this. We also believe in the power of change as a positive, which itself can create energy to produce the local solutions, which must be the focus of our work. But there is much to be done. We need a coordinated approach to get the best for Furness. We need a clear, costed plan that lets all citizens know what is going to happen in the future, as well as confidence in council leadership. We must recognise that we all must take responsibility and not leave it to someone else. Thank you.
Right. Now go over to Peter from Shared Future, who will describe how we went about recruiting the members of the jury.
Thanks, Frank. So my name is Pete Bryant. I'm from Shared Future, which is a not-for-profit organisation based in the Northwest, and we had the privilege of working with this group of Furness residents for the equivalent of about 30 hours. So my colleagues and I helped and supported the group to be able to come to their conclusions and their recommendations. So the other people from Shared Future on the call are Jenny, Martin, Caroline, Jane, and Maria. So the process was part funded by the lottery as part of the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership, with also some funding from the Furness Borough and Furness Council. So what we have through the jury process is a mini version of the local area. So some people call it a mini public. So the way that we went about recruiting the group of people that made up the 20 people of the jury was that 5,000 letters were sent to randomly selected addresses from the Royal Mail database. And people received a letter like you can see there on the screen in front of you. So saying this is what we're going to be talking about, explaining that you don't need to have any knowledge about the topic, and it'll be the equivalent of 10 evenings. And if you're worried about doing stuff online, don't worry, we can support you, we can lend you the gear, we can coach you, and all that. So 5,000 letters went out, and we had 60 people come back to us and said, yep, I'm up for that. And then what we did was the computer then chose 20 people from those 60 to be to reflect the diversity of the local population. So we looked at all the local statistics and some national statistics, and then the computer chose the group of 20 that reflected those statistics in terms of age, in terms of disability, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of gender, in terms of geography, so that we got people from the whole of the area, and also in terms of deprivation and advantage. So we used, for those of you that might be familiar with it, we used something called the indices of multiple deprivation. So we made sure that we had people from advantaged communities and less advantaged and disadvantaged communities as well. And finally, we also selected people based upon attitude to climate change. So we asked a question when people registered about how concerned, if at all, are they about climate change. Very concerned, fairly concerned, not very concerned, or not at all concerned. And we made sure that the makeup of the jury reflected the national statistics around that, so that we had people from that answered all of those questions in different ways, answered the climate change question in different ways, were present with us. And we had 94% attendance over the 10 sessions. Thanks, Frank.
Okay. We had a question to answer. We were continually reminded of it. This is it, Roxanne.
The question that we as a jury have tried to answer is, what should happen in the Furness area to address the emergency of climate change?
Now, we've got a group of our members who will give you personal stories of their involvement. So go ahead. I think Rebecca first.
Rebecca, you're on mute.
As an autistic individual, I have a general interest in climate change. Due to that, I wanted to expand my knowledge on this subject. When the letter came through the door, I jumped at the chance to be a part of the jury. I felt that the sessions were informative and helpful, as well as overwhelming. By the end of the sessions, I felt that my voice was heard in the recommendations. My hope for the recommendations is that we will be listened to and that action will hopefully take place due to our recommendations. Thank you for listening.
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. So my name is Martin. I'm on the Shared Futures team. One of our jury members, Marie, wasn't able to be with us tonight. So I'm going to read out her personal story. I'm Marie. I was born in Barrow and I have lived most of my life in the area, apart from during my teens when my father's job took the family abroad, courtesy of the Ministry of Defence. Ever since hearing my science teacher reading from the Rachel Carson book, Silent Spring, I've been interested in environmental issues. And although I try to be green, I'm no Greta Thunberg. I had recently retired from over 35 years in the NHS when I received a card inviting me to apply for a place on the jury. I felt this was an opportunity to do something positive for the environment and also to get involved in a local campaign for an issue close to my heart. I didn't quite know what to expect, but under the guidance of the facilitators, our recommendations have been developed and refined, encompassing a range of views and opinions from a diverse but optimistic, enthusiastic and cohesive group of Furness citizens. And I have learned so much from my fellow jurors. I hope the recommendations put forward by this jury will be adopted so that the people of Furness can be proud and reassured that we are all doing what we can to combat the climate emergency. Thank you. Roxanne.
Good evening. I'm Roxanne. I'm a primary school teacher and a mum to two young children. Apart from time living away at university and a short amount of time living in Australia, I have spent the rest of my life in the Furness area, growing up in Barrow and now living here. I have always taken an interest in environmental issues and have tried to make changes at home to help live more sustainably, such as recycling, composting, growing your own, etc. I am an optimist and do believe that everyone is able to make small changes which can have a positive impact on our planet. When I received the letter to possibly join the citizens' jury, it immediately sparked an interest, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to explore ways I could help as an individual, with my family, and with my school community. The whole process has been extremely interesting. I have certainly learned a lot from listening to our commentators and enjoyed being able to share views with others. It has been a well-organised and effectively run process to take part in. Over the last few years, lockdown has changed people's lives and made them rethink what is important to them. It has also shown us that big changes can be effectively implemented if the cause is seen as great enough. To me, concerns about the future of our planet are great enough to need changes to be made, and I hope that together we can support plans to set positive changes in motion within the Furness area. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Daniel Stewart. I'm married with 3 children and I live in Dalton in Furness. I work as an engineer for a local defence contractor, and I've been interested in engineering and science from a young age, both from a mechanical and electrical perspective. Over the last decade or so, I've been focusing on efficiency, not just with regard to time, but also materials, energy and fuel. I guess you could say this was driven at first by a desire to increase productivity and cut the cost of living. But as time has gone on and society has become educated towards the theory of climate change, my perspective has altered to include sustainability. If I get involved in anything, I usually like to put in the effort and research to make the best of the opportunity. And so, when the leaflet about the climate change jury popped through the door, I jumped at the chance. I was glad to have been selected, and I guess my main reason for wanting to attend was to discover more about the organisations involved and what the driving reasoning behind the group was. To learn more about climate change itself and current public opinion, but also to hopefully add a voice of reason to the suggestions and consideration to the possible financial implications. During the first session, we heard that the process was funded by a lottery grant. This was encouraging as the local council have faced so many burdens recently. Throughout the process and jury sessions, I was encouraged to see so many passionate, thoughtful people joining the group, both in jury members, commentators and facilitators, and that many suggestions were already in the process of being actioned. For example, improvements to the local electric car charging network, residential building improvement grants, and a move towards sustainable transport, etc. Obviously, recent events over the last 3 years have overshadowed the desire to pursue sustainability. And certainly the fuel and energy prices will have a huge impact too. But people don't like to feel helpless or believe there's nothing they can contribute. So I hope you find some of the suggestions provided by the group useful and innovative, with little financial burden. Towards the end of the process, I felt positive. Although I still believe individual personal change is overplayed, when we work together, we can influence those in power, we can work as a group, and slowly but surely change the fundamentals of modern industrial society. Thank you.
Okay, we go over to Pete now, who will describe what happened in our very first session. Thank you, Pete.
Thanks, Frank. So in the first few sessions, we tried to make the atmosphere as light as possible so that people start to feel relaxed and are encouraged that this is a process that's worth staying with. So what we do in those first sessions is we get people to go into lots of small groups and to have conversations with each other and to starting to build relationships with each other. So one of the first activities we did in session 1 was we asked people to think about what would make it easier for them to be able to take part for the remaining sessions. And this led to the group producing its own ground rules for how we were going to work as a group for the remaining sessions. We heard from the leader of the council, Councillor Anne Thompson, to explain why the process was being organised, and there was a question and answer session with the councillor. And then we worked in small groups to look at a map that everybody had been sent of the Furness area, and people introduced themselves and where they lived, and were asked to think of 3 words to describe where they live. You'll find much more information about the steps that we went through in the whole of the process in the report, which is going to be launched next week. Then in session 2, folk came back a week later, and we had our first commentator that Louise is going to explain a little bit more about in a second. And that commentator talked to the group about what is climate change and what are its impacts. We then did an activity to get them to think a little bit about what they would like their future communities to look like in 30 years' time. In session 3, we also did some work with something called problem trees, which got the group to start thinking a little bit more about what the root causes of some of the problems are around climate change, so that they started to develop a more of a system thinking analysis of the problem. And then at the end of session 3, there was another commentator who talked about where the emissions are coming from, specifically in the Furness area. Thanks, Frank.
Okay. Next slide, please. Right. During the process, we were given helpful. Oh, sorry. Now Oliver will tell us how we selected our 3 main areas. Slipped up there.
So, continuing from Pete, in session 4, we all began to understand that climate change was more complex and we needed to go deeper. So we all went into small groups to discuss different points of views on climate change and different topics. And then we decided to vote on the 3 main important topics that we found we should go into greater detail into. Those 3 topics were transport, encouraging action, and energy generation.
Thank you, Oliver. Right. During the process, we were given much helpful input from a wide range of commentators. Over to Louise, please.
Thank you. So we had a variety of people who joined us as commentators and talked to us about their area of expertise and interest. The format was consistent, with each commentator giving us an overview of the things that they felt we would want to know and need to know about. And then we had the opportunity to reflect on this and then pose questions to them in small breakout rooms and then in larger groups. We then used this information to feed into our recommendations. The commentators were chosen based on the areas which we as a jury had indicated that we would like to know more about. So we were involved in this part of the process as well, with the oversight panel then choosing who was best placed to represent those areas. As we're not experts in their field, we made sure that when the commentators were speaking, that they didn't bamboozle us with any jargon, and each jury had a red card, which we would flash if on the screen, if the commentator talking was using any language that we didn't understand or acronyms or anything like that. The facilitators kept an eye on us and immediately flagged it with the commentator if this had happened, so that they could make sure that we were all on the same page. This way, it was completely inclusive and nobody got lost at all. The facilitators were also present in the breakout groups and would help us to capture our questions, which we would then feed back, and to make sure that our understanding was correct about what we'd heard and put it into context if we needed. So who were our commentators? Well, there were quite a few. As you can see on your screen at the moment, we had plenty of expertise to draw upon. As Pete's already touched on, the early people had put it into context for us as to why we were here and the kind of questions that we were asking. I'll give you a little more overview about the rest of people as a whole. So in the early sessions, we had Dr. Paul Young from Lancaster Environment Centre at the Lancaster University, who really posed the question of what climate change is and the potential impact. And from there, we went into session 3, where we were looking at emissions and the context for Cumbria. And that was with Lorraine Richard-Stones, who was a consultant at Small World Consulting. In session 5, we had 3 people talk to us about low carbon energy, and then you can see their names on here. And then session 6 linked into transport. Session 8 was a busy one. We had 8 people talk to us about how we encourage action in the local community, council and businesses. And as you can imagine, this session was very compacted, so the presentations were shorter and therefore not as comprehensive as the previous weeks. But this didn't impact on us. We still had the opportunity to ask the questions that we needed. All the commentators were very well prepared and really interesting and easy to talk to. On occasions, they didn't have the answers to the questions that we posed, which I guess in a way is good because it shows that as a panel, we were really engaged and asking perhaps the right questions. And they would take those questions away. They would then feed back to the facilitators on the most part and give us the answers that we'd asked for. Overall, having the commentators available was helpful, and we definitely drew upon the information that we learnt from them to take forward into our recommendations.
Okay. Now it's over to Tom.
Thank you. Okay, so the slide here, writing our recommendations, shows just the basic mechanics of the writing process when we got around to it. And you'll see there's 4 headings. I'll just go through a couple of them. The discussion groups we started off with based on the chosen themes. Going then to suggested recommendations based on the commentators' sessions and discussing them. Then the next 2 are voting and ranking the votes. And I think Pete will say a bit more about that. Now, what the slide does not show, because it's just the basics, is that we had quite a lengthy process for this, and it was also intensive. We had a great deal to do. Now, this was very well organised by Shared Future. The facilitators actually did facilitate, they were helpful, by taking our ideas expressed orally and knocking them skillfully and at speed into written sentences that were displayed on the screen. We were encouraged early in the second half of our 10 meetings to think about our potential recommendations. Now, this, again, was an intensive process. We'd heard a lot of experts. There'd been a lot to take in, and it was a little overwhelming. And so it's a bit difficult, really, to come up with what we thought were the best things to do. And also, we noted that from hearing these experts, a lot of them talked from business and from the council about plans which are actually in being. And we thought, well, why should we really focus on making recommendations about things that are already being spoken about in the plans? If they're already in the plans, why make recommendations? But we thought, well, there is a point to this, and the point is that we are local people bringing our own experience to bear of the community, and we needed to feed this in. And also, we couldn't be sure of what the council was actually doing and what business and so forth were actually doing. We needed to put things forward that we thought were right, and then try to hold people to account, hold people's feet to the fire, if you will. Not just the council, it's not just them getting to do things for us, it involves us as well as citizens. We all need to be engaged. Now, by the end of session 8, we already had 22 recommendations from just 2 themes that had been chosen for special focus earlier on. One of these was transport, and energy was another. And after that, it was really a matter of getting fitting a pint into a half-pint pot. So we needn't have worried about lack of recommendations. And there were the themes that we'd already chosen. There were other themes which didn't neatly fit. They fitted into a category we called other. And you'll see some of them in the list of recommendations, which are just called other, including the one which was a lead recommendation, incidentally. So we had to choose which discussion groups to go into. This, we did so on the basis of our own sort of pet ideas and what we thought we could contribute. But it was not always easy to tell which group to prioritize. So we were given 2 or 3 shots. We went into our first choice and then into our second choice. Now, the whole thing, I'm very pleased to say, was done with a very cooperative atmosphere. As was indicated earlier on, there were some disagreements, but the atmosphere was conducive to getting things done. And we always knew anyway, through knowing the process, that things would be voted upon and the ranking would come later on. Now, there was a problem with overlooking stuff that hadn't gone into our main chosen themes. Energy was so big that it had to be split between low carbon energy generation in one group and reducing energy use in another. So we had to squeeze things in. Now, cutting the motions down, this is where the Shared Future helped quite a lot between the jury sessions. They busied themselves hammering out composite motions so that we didn't sort of have overlapping areas. And they were very good at coherently stitching things together. It was difficult to find time for everything. We had to narrow down to focus relentlessly on what could actually be achieved realistically and at the local level. Here in Furness, we wanted to be ambitious, but also practical. Now, this was all a bit confusing at times. it wasn't quite as clear as the formal procedure suggests. It could get quite messy. If you like, it was a bit like sausages. If you like them, you don't necessarily want to see them being made. Now, after session 9, the oversight panel comes into its own because they saw the recommendations that we'd come up with, and they came up with some helpful comments about these with a good range of perspectives. It was great to have an oversight panel that was very, very varied. So we got representatives from fossil fuel energy producers and big local industry concerns, which are high emitters, but also ranging right the way through to more obviously green outfits, if you like, climate emergency activist organizations, and that was great. Now, to conclude, we were advised that we could take these comments on board or not, according to our own judgment. Thank you.
Okay, now back to Peter from Shared Future, who will describe how the voting process worked.
Thanks, Frank. So after the process that Tom has described, we had a set of draft recommendations. So those draft recommendations were then put into a booklet that was shared with all the members of the jury, and they were then asked to vote on each of the recommendations. So they were asked to say whether or not they strongly supported, neither supported or opposed, or strongly opposed each recommendation. Then to get the ranking, what we did was we gave 2 points for a recommendation that was strongly supported, 1 for one that was supported, -1 for one that was opposed, and -2 for one that was strongly opposed. So that's how we ended up with the ranking. All of this information is going to be in the final report, which we mentioned earlier is going to be released next week. And also in the report will be all the comments that were made by the jury members about each recommendation. So in the voting booklet, they were given an opportunity to explain in their own words what they felt about each recommendation and why they voted for it, which means that we have a huge wealth of information now that helps that will help you to better understand why some recommendations were voted higher than others. Thanks, Frank.
Okay, the recommendations were in quite a narrow band of scores. The top 10 will now be presented by members of the jury. Starting with Nick.
Good evening, everyone. At number 10, the local business improvement district should be encouraged to focus their membership and wider business community to actively promote low carbon travel options of their employees. This could include an electric vehicle fleet funded by larger businesses to offer coordinated transport options for people getting to and from work. The use of electric bikes could be more widely promoted and financially supported for employees by businesses.
Now we have Leanne.
Barry?
There needs to be a comprehensive plan on how best to inspire action through informing the public on climate change, on A, everything that relates to climate change, and B, what action can be taken. The council needs to be proactive about using all possible methods to inform the public and businesses. Including social media and informal and community networks. The communications and engagement strategy needs a thorough review, as current methods are outdated and boring. This can be done by getting advice from a wide range of people, including young people, and considering what can be used as a hook. For example, linking things to the rubbish recycling collection calendar. A, there should be a well-designed, concise community leaflet distributed to residents monthly, highlighting positive actions being taken and key steps people can take now, including from local businesses who might contribute to the cost as a way of drip feeding encouragement and engagement without being overwhelming. B, a festival should be initiated for fun, inspiration, and environmental action that harnesses the arts, participation, and learning. C, a network of local community champions should be created and supported to act as a hub for environmental action. D, climate change should be a regular topic in school assemblies. People's assemblies should be held on climate change for adults that are led by children's perspectives. In putting this plan together, we need to shift from telling people about the doom-laden crisis to telling stories and sharing optimistic examples about the positive benefits of taking action to tackle climate change, such as well-being and biodiverse green spaces. This engagement needs to meet people where they are, from Tesco to the gym or the rugby ground. Instead of inviting people to events, we should take events, festivals to them, including the arts, such as street performances, and harnessing the enthusiasm and perspectiveness of young people. And we can see the Dumfries and Galloway active travel strategy as an example of engagement methods. Thank you.
Roseanne?
Increase access to expert impartial advice on energy saving measures available to households, such as the Cumbria Action for Sustainability Coal to Cosy scheme, which could be much more widely promoted. Promotion should be targeted at local residents, including via social media, as well as on the ground, for example, multiple supermarket notice boards, leisure centres, libraries, health centres, etc. These schemes should incorporate learning from initiatives that have been implemented in the past, such as the Green Homes Grant.
And from me. Right. We need investment in cycling infrastructure and cycle paths to encourage more people to cycle. This should be done by improving cycle lanes and road surfaces, which should be clearly marked and well maintained. Road surfaces and cycle lanes require different surface materials. We should lobby for extra funding for this. There should be better mapping and showcasing of existing and future footpaths and cycle routes and links to encourage use. This should be made as simple as a tube map on a board or like the routes around Grisdale. The council should be converting more footpaths to bridleways to be used for cycling. We should secure places for bike storage to encourage cycling and raising awareness in Furness of cyclists' rights to be on paths and roads. Enabling cycling between Barrow, Dalton and Ulverston and beyond with minimal interaction with traffic using segregated routes. And the council should be making sure that encouraging electric bike use for medium journeys should be included in transport plans and enforcing no parking in cycling lanes.
Local governments should lobby national government to accelerate the changes to 2025 Future Homes Standard to ensure that planning and building control should only permit new builds, domestic and commercial, if they meet the highest energy efficiency (EPC) standard. This should include solar panels and heat pumps or other technologies as appropriate. Also, old ruined buildings in Barrow should be repurposed or rebuilt on before building on green spaces.
We have we don't have Dave.
I'm going to fill in for Dave. Hi.
Thank you, Caroline.
So locally produced food has very low food miles and can sequester carbon. The council should bring overgrown allotment plots back into a manageable condition so that they can be effectively taken on by people on the allotment waiting list. Regular inspections should be undertaken to ensure that plots are kept in working order and can be reclaimed if not in use. Access to allotments, including shared community allotments, should be prioritised. It must be made easier to link local people up with local food producers to buy local food.
Thank you. Yeah, this one's about encouraging action. The council should report back to this jury every 6 months. The jury requires transparent explanations about the extent of progress with the final recommendations. Smart objectives should be identified by the council. For example, the climate change lead in collaboration with relevant people or departments and/or outside agencies in relation to each of the recommendations. The council should give consideration as to how they can continue to support jury members who wish to continue their involvement in the work of the jury.
Oliver?
Trees and carbon sinks in the local area should be protected. This is quite a big issue because of deforestation in the recent years, and the council should undertake a study to establish and improve the current situation with an implementation plan that should stop local deforestation, which has happened recently. And they should also include and consider trees in council planning guidelines whilst building parks or business buildings. And
go ahead, Nick.
Create more green spaces in the town centre and surroundings. Repurpose areas of wasteland not in use.
Thank you.
And finally, coming in at number 1, perhaps you should have a big fanfare for this one. Anyway, it's recycling. The council should give information on what can and cannot be recycled to ensure effectiveness and avoid skepticism about the value of recycling by a number of things. Introducing an awareness program in schools to engage young people and families on recycling. Providing better facilities and support for recycling for residents in flats. Enforcing contract for waste collection to deal with misplaced recycling. Introducing curbside conversations with residents and a wider education campaign for correct recycling.
Thank you. We will now take a break. When we come back, we will be moving into discussion groups. There'll be 2 sessions to choose from. Staying with your first session will be an option. The choices should be coming up. Thank you.
Maria, do you want to move it forward a slide?
Perhaps I can just jump in and say, so Frank was just looking for the list of the 4 discussion group themes.
Thank you.
So so we'll go for a break in a moment, but just to let you know, when we come back, we'll be splitting into breakout rooms for discussions around the themes of transport, low carbon energy generation, encouraging action, or all the other topics that didn't fit into those first 3. So let's go for a break. So it's 7:49 now. Let's take 10 minutes. So if we could all be back by 7:59, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, it just remains for a few words from me then. So thank you to all the stakeholders here who've turned up on behalf of the jury. And simply by being here, you've already demonstrated a significant interest. Now, after this evening, we need you to move from interest to active support, although many of you have shown in the discussion groups that you're already into that, but you need to engage your colleagues as well and rally further support. Now, as jury members, we have all had our awareness raised in the course of hearing from the experts and in our discussions as to the urgency of the issues. Some of us have certainly been checking our carbon footprint, our personal one, and started taking active steps to reduce it. We now need to see a comparable commitment from everybody in the communal and corporate roles in the coming months and years. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, everybody, thanks ever so much for coming. It's really, really appreciated. So there's another launch event that will be very similar to this one that's open to the general public, and that will be next Tuesday. So we can provide you with the link so that you can invite more people to come along to that as well. But I'd like to say a massive thanks to the jury members that came along to tonight's session as well before we say goodbye.
Yeah, really, really good job, everyone on the jury. I really appreciated everyone's efforts. Good job. Well done.